In last week's video I finished the new lead screw and the nut for the shaper. And because that week had only 7 days, it's a little bit bizarre, but only 7 days, and I used all of them, I had no time left to do the reassembly of the shaper. So before I start partying, it's maybe a good idea to put the whole thing here back together. And I think I have a really easy way to do this. It doesn't work. Okay, old-fashioned way then. I think it starts to look like a shaper again. Except for one little detail, and that is of course the vise. Shit. Something wrong here. Okay, nothing special. It was just a little chip that was stuck here in the surface of the vise. Chips happens, you know. I installed a shear tool and some kind of workpiece. But before I start the first test, first I would like to rectify something. In last week's video, where I made the lead screw for this machine, I said this. I completely messed up my thread here. Don't know what happened. Probably some measuring mistake. So the thing is too loose. And I think as long as I don't figure out what went wrong, I didn't learn a thing. So let's figure it out. The trapeze thread I made on the lead screw is not an Acme thread. An Acme thread has a combined angle of 29 degrees. And this is a metric one I made, and it has a combined angle of 30 degrees. The pitch 2 mm and depth of cut 1 mm. And to cut this thread I plunged straight in, because it's a shallow angle. The tool is cutting the three sides same time, but not too big chip. I took my time, light cuts, and it worked perfectly fine. After, I had to cut a metric thread. And in metric we always define the pitch. And because it's 60 degrees, the pitch, if we plunge in at 60 degrees, is of course also the depth of cut. I think it makes sense, right? Of course, minus the little tip that we have to cut off, and minus the little bottom tip that we have to cut off, but more or less. What I did, and this is where I went wrong, instead of cutting at 60 degrees, I plunged also straight in. And that's why my thread was cut too deep. So indeed, I learned something. Right, that said, before we start, first a little bit a show off. Absolutely no play. I did two surfaces. This one I used a step over of 1/10 of a millimeter. It's 2 clicks. And this surface I used a step over of 1 click. So it gives 1/20th of a millimeter. And the surface finish, you can see the difference, but it's not a big difference. And on this one I used apart the typical cutting oil, and this I don't think the camera will pick it up, but this part I used WD-40, and the surface finish is less good than the typical cow milk coolant system thing. But all in all, I think it looks very clean. You know what? Let's cheat a bit. I think this is a really nice result. Now, this is nothing special, it's just a piece of home, garden and kitchen steel, so I think it works really fine. This kind of test sometimes also reveals other things, like for example the two surfaces I made here. I pinched the finished surface here on the fixed jowl and pushed with a copper wire to make sure it's well seated. And after the cut, the thing is not square. It's really close, but it's not square. Now, that's a little problem I will fix another time, that's no big deal. So, a very interesting test to know if the lead screw is correct or not is of course also making stairs. I have a very small piece of whatever steel that I will put here in the vise and then cut 2 mm deep and 2 mm wide every time. So it will give 45 degrees, but we don't care. And then the most important is that we have exactly 2 mm, 4 mm, 6, 8, 10. I set the cutting edge of my tool square with the movement of the table. And to set the zero, I do more or less the same as we do sometimes on the plate. With the scale we can feel exactly the right spot. Right here. Depth of cut 1 mm. So every step I will cut in 2 times. +1, +3.5, +6, +4, +5, +5, +5. There are small differences in the measurements, but I think all of them all about more or less 5/100ths of a millimeter. That's a good result. I think if I have to do it better, now it depends on the operator and not on the machine. And before I end this video, one last little thing. It works!